Storm Shadow, the evergreen fan favorite from G.I. Joe. The G.I. Joe film series is a staple if you are a fan of action movies. What started off as a toy line has now grown into a multi-film franchise, along with a significant comic book and television presence, all having major character arcs and deep backstories. Two super important characters in the franchise happen to be Snake Eyes, who was recently explored in depth in an origin film about him released in 2021, and Storm Shadow, who is Snake Eyes' arch nemesis and complete opposite. Although Storm Shadow does not have a live-action film to his name, the character has been an integral part of the franchise from the beginning, and his storyline keeps getting better. He has been both friend and foe to his sword brother, and is also an immensely popular character from the franchise. Keep watching to know all about him. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. A Real American Hero, the animated series that paints his backstory. Ron Friedman is the creator of the half-hour American animated television program, G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero. The animation, which was based on the Hasbro storyline, aired in syndication from 1983 until 1986. There were 95 episodes created in total. The town of Springfield, the October Guard, and the Baroness were just a few of the plot components that were shared by the G.I. Joe comics and animated series, but weren't at the time components of the toy line. They did not, however, follow the same continuity, and as a result, they diverged greatly in terms of the way the stories were penned and the characters were portrayed. The animated series brought the Storm Shadow character to life by portraying him as a ruthless killer. He was shown to be a commander, and his physical skills and combat prowess are largely highlighted in the show, because the show's primary push was to sell the toy line. There was a major focus on his expertise with the bow and arrow as well. The friendship and the larger complicated relationship between Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow were interestingly never explored in the Sunbow animated series, in contrast to the comics. He initially appeared in The Revenge of the Cobra, a miniseries in which he goes up against Spirit, a G.I. Joe member, for one of the three pieces of the Weather Dominator. When Zartan catches the third component and sells it to the highest bidder, he gives Spirit the piece in exchange for saving him from drowning, but subsequently steals it from G.I. Joe headquarters. Storm Shadow was frequently shown in the series as a rival to Spirit, and later as a foe of Quick Kick from the G.I. Joe team. In the Excalibur episodes, he steals King Arthur's sword from the Lady of the Lake after crashing into a lake following an aerial combat. This starts as a thunderstorm that lasts until Excalibur is brought back. Storm Shadow runs into Quick Kick twice in that episode, breaking his leg each time.
My leg.
Until the conclusion of the Sunbow series, Storm Shadow remained devoted to Cobra. He was seen assisting Cobra Commander in a number of his attempts to depose Serpentor in Season 2, siding with the Commander against Serpentor. Storm Shadow, as seen in the movies. In the movie universe, when Storm Shadow first encountered Snake Eyes, whom he mistook for a thief, they ended up engaging in combat. As far as information about his childhood is concerned, Storm Shadow was Hardmaster's nephew and a trainee assassin. Snake Eyes, on the other hand, who was Hardmaster's favorite student after making an impression on him with his abilities, was quite evidently more skilled out of the two. Storm Shadow was envious of this and left the dojo as a result of what he considered to be favoritism and quite demeaning to him as the blood heir of the dojo. Storm Shadow's uncle gets murdered in the movies, and it was only later revealed that Zartan, another villain who worked with the Cobra Commander, was the person who killed the Hardmaster and falsely accused Storm Shadow when Snake Eyes first learned that Hardmaster had been slain. Specifically in the 2009 film G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra, the child version of Storm Shadow is portrayed by Brandon Soo, and the adult Storm Shadow is portrayed by Lee Byung-hun. Storm Shadow is presented in this movie adaptation as a Korean ninja who received his training in Japan. While undergoing training in Tokyo, the young Storm Shadow is heard chatting in Korean, confirming his origins. This movie gives us a glimpse into his childhood. When they were young, Storm Shadow first came into contact with Snake Eyes when he caught a starved Snake Eyes trying to steal food. To Storm Shadow's dismay, Snake Eyes is welcomed into the dojo right away. Although Storm Shadow is superior in all combat respects at first, Snake Eyes perseveres and eventually wins the Hard Master's approval and surpasses Storm Shadow's abilities. Soon after, Snake Eyes is named the top pupil over Storm Shadow, and this event further sours the already strained relationship between the two. In fact, it is implied that Storm Shadow killed their teacher, the Hard Master, before escaping the scene, although this is not true and Storm Shadow himself was torn by the death of the Master. As a result of being on different sides, their competition grows into a passionate animosity. Storm Shadow is McCullen's killer and the Baroness's bodyguard and mentor, and he shares the same history and attire as his continuity counterparts in the movie. It turns out that the Baroness had purposely given Storm Shadow the task to carry out a direct order to kill Baron Daniel de Cobre if he ever touched her again, because he was known to respect women and protect their honor. Although the true reason was that de Cobre had outlived his usefulness to them, but the Baroness, however, played on his code of honor. Storm Shadow had been sent by McCullen to assist the Baroness in obtaining the nanomite warheads. But in another incident, Zartan, the leader of the Dreadnoks, made fun of Storm Shadow for not wanting to harm women. Snake Eyes repeatedly cuts Storm Shadow during a tense battle at Cobra's Arctic headquarters, eventually forcing him to take off his white suit. He is ultimately stabbed by Snake Eyes and plunges into chilly water in the movie, marking his demise, or so it seemed. Storm Shadow appeared to have died in the movie, but he actually lived in the humorous sequel Operation Hiss. In an interview conducted post the first movie, Lee Byung-hun had claimed that he had already agreed to reprise his part in any future sequel to the movie G.I. Joe: Retaliation, and thus he was seen in that one as well. During Operation Hiss, Storm Shadow, posing as Snake Eyes, kills the Pakistani president and, with Firefly's assistance, frees Cobra Commander from jail. He flees to a temple somewhere in the frosty Himalayas to recover after being hurt in an explosion. When the Blind Master finds out Storm Shadow is still alive, Snake Eyes and Jinx catch him and bring him to the Master in Japan to confront him about the assassination of the Hard Master, which they all believed had been carried out by Storm Shadow. During this time, he explains that Zartan, the real murderer, had actually taken in and raised Storm Shadow to be a merciless assassin, and that he joined Cobra to avenge the death of his uncle without ever knowing that his own master had killed his uncle. He divulges the truth that Zartan had him falsely accused of killing the Hard Master. Storm Shadow then battles Snake Eyes with the very same sword that had been used to kill the Hard Master in an effort to disprove Snake Eyes' guilt, because Arashikage steel does not break.
Arashikage steel does not break.
Storm Shadow eventually turns on Cobra and joins the Joes in their conflict, murdering Zartan in the process. After they've won, he bids Snake Eyes and Jinx farewell before departing, having cleared his name. In the follow-up movie, G.I. Joe: Retaliation, which was released in 2013, Storm Shadow returns to exact revenge on Snake Eyes. Remember how he was stabbed by Snake Eyes and fell into icy water at the end of the first movie? He was dispatched to Germany to aid Cobra Commander in escaping from prison with the help of Firefly under the guise of Snake Eyes, who was wanted for the murder of the President of Pakistan. Storm Shadow, who had been hurt in an explosion, went to a mountain fortress so that an elderly woman might treat her. He was abducted by Snake Eyes and Jinx and given to the Arashikage clan. The Blind Master was about to kill Storm Shadow when he disclosed that Zartan, not him, had actually killed his uncle, the Hard Master, and that he had been set up for the crime. Storm Shadow, who was resentful that no one in the clan had confidence in him, joined Cobra in an effort to convince the Arashikage clan of his innocence. In order to aid the Joes, he would betray Cobra, reveal Cobra Commander's lie to the world leaders, and knife Zartan for framing him as the murderer of Hard Master. Storm Shadow left after obtaining his retribution and bidding Snake Eyes and Jinx farewell. With the release of the new movie Snake Eyes G.I. Joe Origins, which stars Andrew Koji as Tommy Arashikage, the future Storm Shadow, and Henry Golding as the title character, although the movie takes place in an alternative reality, the character belongs to the Arashikage clan, just like in every other reality. Both Tommy Saburo, Tommy Arashikage, and his cousin Kenta were candidates to take over as clan chief. Kenta attempted to have Tommy killed, because there must only be one, and as a result was expelled from the clan. In the present, Kenta, who was now a Yakuza boss and a member of Cobra, commanded his recruit Snake Eyes to kill Tommy, but Snake Eyes instead aided Tommy's escape. In exchange, Tommy offers Snake Eyes the chance to join the Arashikage clan and transports him to Tokyo, an alliance being formed between the two. In addition, Tommy offers Snake Eyes a katana called the Morning Light and informs him about the Jewel of the Sun, a powerful artifact from the ancient times that the clan was vowed to guard and not use. When Snake Eyes steals the jewel on behalf of Kenta, it is subsequently discovered that he was a mole and was acting as a spy for none other than Storm Shadow's cousin Kenta. Snake Eyes is subsequently attacked by a furious Tommy, who had finally begun trusting him but obviously lost all faith. However, Snake Eyes, having realized his error, persuades Tommy that they must stop Kenta, which they do.
We have to stop Kenta! He has the jewel!
Kenta is deemed unworthy to lead the Arashikage clan after Tommy uses the jewel against him. Tommy then abandons the clan and swears that if they ever cross paths again, he will murder Snake Eyes. In a scene towards the middle of the credits, Tommy is chosen by the Baroness to join Cobra and takes the name Storm Shadow. It happens in a scene towards the middle of the credits. Although their bond as ninja sword brothers has stayed pretty stable throughout the years since Hasbro's toy line was first introduced, Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow undoubtedly have a long history, marked by an equal number of alliances and betrayals. With Snake Eyes G.I. Joe Origins, a potential start to a new G.I. Joe film universe, a new era has now begun. Additionally, the conclusion makes some rather significant predictions for Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow's future. After some time as rivals, maybe they'll start working together again. Who knows? Do you prefer them as comrades? Or does Storm Shadow really thrive in the role of the conflicted bad guy? Let us know in the comments section below. His comic book story arc in brief. In the comics, Storm Shadow is the Cobra Commander's ninja bodyguard and best assassin. He has 30 generations of assassins in his family tree, and is pretty much a prime example of a morally gray character, one who is always in conflict with his own self and others due to events that transpired in his past. Storm Shadow's major motivation for joining the wicked Cobra organization is a need for vengeance rather than greed. As young ninjas in training, Storm Shadow, or Tommy Arashikage, as was his real name, struck up a deep friendship with Snake Eyes and then saved his life in a deadly situation. However, Snake Eyes turned out to be the more skilled ninja between the two, overpowering Tommy on multiple occasions. In fact, many thought that Snake Eyes would be the one to take over the family assassination business, even though Tommy was the Hard Master's nephew, and thus stood to inherit the business as far as blood was concerned. This rivalry between them kept growing, and hit a boiling point on the day the Hard Master was murdered by someone using a bow and arrow, the arrow being from Tommy's quiver. He was essentially framed and set out to find the person who had killed his uncle. In fact, it was on the condition that the commander would finally identify the person who killed his uncle that the Cobra Commander won his loyalty. Thus, Tommy never returned to his family business and took on the moniker of Storm Shadow, which was the English translation of his family name, and became a Cobra agent. As a Cobra agent, he worked his way up to the hierarchy and became the Cobra Commander's main bodyguard. He did finally find the identity of his uncle's killer, Zartan, and also made an effort to apprehend him on Cobra Island. However, unfortunately, it was during this time that Storm Shadow was shot multiple times by Baroness, Cobra's intelligence officer and lieutenant to the Cobra Commander. Dr. Mindbender saved Storm Shadow's body for his research, using it to produce Serpentor. Storm Shadow was revived as a result of this. He then reconnected with Snake Eyes post his resurrection, and even rescued his old friend on occasion. Snake Eyes, his sword brother, was able to persuade him to let go of his desire for vengeance, and he even joined the Joe team, participating in numerous missions and escapades. He was, however, abducted by Cobra on a regular assignment and brainwashed back into their service. Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow are now in conflict with one another once more. What made him such a deadly soldier? In every major appearance, he has been shown to be a deadly soldier with no remorse for any of his activities. He is cutthroat and abides by his code of violence and gets what he wants. Storm Shadow was a violent and vicious individual who killed without hesitation. Since Snake Eyes was their clan master's favorite, he used to be envious of the other boy, so much so that they became sworn enemies in many accounts and interactions between the two. Storm Shadow had no qualms about killing innocent people, since he thought that fear was the only useful way to keep people in check, like the age-old saying that most villains utter at some point in their life. He believed that it was better to be feared than to be loved. At one point, he didn't even care if Paris was destroyed. In fact, he was the one who launched the missile, carrying nanomite warheads that would have done so. However, Zartan, who worked closely with him on various occasions, as he too reported to the Cobra commander, claimed that Storm Shadow never killed a woman, despite his aggressive and merciless attitude. Storm Shadow declared that he would make an exception only one time, when Zartan killed Coverall. Although Snake Eyes ultimately prevailed in their final battle, Storm Shadow was also highly sure of his skills, and thought he would be able to kill Snake Eyes. Strangely, Shadow once referred to Snake Eyes as his brother, despite the fact that they were not related and most definitely did not have a sibling-like bond. Given that they were reared and educated by the same master, this would imply that they regard each other as clan brothers. We can no way ignore Storm Shadow's incredible fighting skills while explaining why he is a deadly soldier. Storm Shadow is a master of ninjutsu and a ferociously effective combatant. Only Snake Eyes have been able to engage him in battle on an even playing field out of all the G.I. Joes. He wielded 2 katana swords that can be joined to create a single double-bladed sword. In addition, Storm Shadow exhibited lethal accuracy when hurling things like shuriken and shattered glass. He also showed his proficiency with the nunchaku by defeating Snake Eyes while using it when they were younger. He shared Snake Eyes' abilities to move with impeccable stealth, excellent acrobatics, and an incredible agility. Even a gunshot fired at him was sliced in half by his agility and speed. He seemed to have a more aggressive combat technique than Snake Eyes, which would fit his violent nature. Storm Shadow has, however, on occasion demonstrated that he does not have a sense of honor despite his frigid heart. His willingness to team up with the Joes to prevent Sartan, the leader of the Dreadnoks and Cobra Commander, from using the Project Zeus superweapon is proof of this. But beware, do not take Storm Shadow lightly. He can and will deal a fatal blow if you try to cross him. Storm Shadow is a widely loved character and has been very well received on multiple occasions. On the list of the 10 coolest G.I. Joe ninjas 2010, Storm Shadow was ranked second by Topless Robot, who also noted that he was voted on the #1 Cobra villain by the Old Action Force Weekly. His resemblance is also present in the League of Legends, where the characters Zed and the Arctic Ops skin, which displays the camouflage pattern worn by the 1988 Storm Shadow, are both available for the YOLO Ninja character Kennen, who can also be given the skin. It is safe to say that such characters who tread the morality gray path are loved by fans because it gives them something to root for. Storm Shadow can definitely go on to become a mainstay in the G.I. Joe film franchise. How do you feel about Storm Shadow in the franchise? Let us know in the comments section below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.